A billionaire, tired of his cold, calculated life, made an outrageous decision. He would marry the first woman who walked through his door, no matter who she was. But when a modest, unassuming woman stepped in, what followed was something no one could have anticipated. What began as an impulsive gamble soon unraveled into a whirlwind of unexpected emotions, challenges, and transformations that changed both of their lives forever. Stay tuned as we unravel a story filled with surprises, laughter, and twists that could change everything. Ethan Cole was a man who had it all, at least that's what it seemed like from the outside. A towering figure in the world of finance, he was the kind of man whose name was whispered with awe, whose face appeared on magazine covers, and whose presence commanded any room he entered. He was known for his calculated business deals, his unmatched intuition in the market, and his lavish lifestyle. But beyond the glitz and glamour of his billionaire status, Ethan's life was marked by an aching emptiness. His home, a sprawling mansion perched atop a hill overlooking the city, was impeccably decorated but devoid of warmth. His calendar was full of meetings and events, yet every day felt lonelier than the last. Behind the manicured lawns, the marble floors, and the priceless art hanging on his walls, Ethan was a man without a true sense of purpose. The kind of man whose successes had been built on ambition, but who had lost sight of what made life truly worth living. For years he had thrown himself into his work, believing that more money, more power, and more prestige would fill the void that gnawed at him. But the void only seemed to grow larger, the loneliness more unbearable. Ethan's wealth had brought him everything he could ever want, except happiness. One particularly cold morning, as he sat in his study surrounded by luxury but feeling utterly hollow, an idea struck him. A challenge that was as absurd as it was appealing. He would marry the first woman who walked through his door. It sounded crazy, reckless even. But perhaps it was just the kind of madness he needed to bring some life back into his carefully controlled existence. Ethan had grown weary of the endless parade of superficial relationships that were based on his bank account rather than genuine emotion. He wanted something real, something different, something that could shake up the carefully curated world he had created for himself, even if it meant diving headfirst into the unknown. The impulse came to him suddenly, and he decided not to question it. Perhaps it was a desperate attempt to bring some spontaneity into his otherwise meticulously planned life, or maybe it was a way of rebelling against the expectations placed on him by society. Either way, he made the decision right then and there. He called his assistant and instructed his staff not to filter or prevent any visitors from entering the estate that day. Whoever she was, a delivery person, a solicitor, a stranger, he was determined to keep his word. This act of randomness, he hoped, would bring him something that all his wealth could not buy: genuine connection. The morning was crisp, and the sky was a pale shade of blue as the sun began to rise. Ethan sat in his study, his gaze wandering over the landscape beyond the tall windows. The sprawling garden stretched out in front of him, its neat rows of flowers and trimmed hedges a testament to the order he demanded in his life. But today, he was letting go of that order, at least a little bit. He took a deep breath, feeling an odd sense of anticipation that he hadn't felt in years. The sun had barely risen when the doorbell rang. Ethan, sitting in his study with a steaming cup of coffee, felt his heart skip a beat. This was it. This was the moment when everything could change, when the unknown would step into his life and perhaps bring with it a sense of purpose that he had been missing. He placed the coffee cup down on the table, the sound of porcelain meeting wood echoing softly through the otherwise silent room. He stood up, adjusted his shirt, and walked with purpose to the door, his footsteps echoing in the grand hallway. As he opened the door, he was greeted by a woman who looked startled. She was young, her hair slightly tousled from the winter wind. She wore a plain brown jacket, jeans, and scuffed sneakers, and in her hands was a small cardboard box. Her eyes widened as she looked up at the imposing figure in front of her. Ethan Cole, whose face she recognized from newspapers and magazines, whose name was synonymous with power and wealth. "Hi, I'm just here to deliver," she began, her voice trailing off as she tried to make sense of the situation. But before she could finish her sentence, Ethan interrupted. his voice calm but his eyes intense. "Would you marry me?" The words hung in the air between them, the absurdity of the situation freezing her in place. Her name was Lily Evans, a delivery driver who was used to meeting people from all walks of life. She had delivered packages to small apartments, luxury condos, and even the occasional mansion. But never in her wildest dreams had she imagined being proposed to by a billionaire she had only just met. Lily blinked, staring at Ethan as if waiting for him to break into a smile and reveal it was all some kind of strange joke. But he didn't. Instead, he looked at her with a seriousness that made her realize he was, in fact, being completely sincere. She could see it in his eyes. An earnestness that seemed out of place in someone like him. It was almost as if he was desperate for something that she couldn't quite put her finger on. "I know this sounds insane," Ethan continued, his voice softening. "But I'm tired of everything being calculated and planned. I want something real, and I've decided to take a chance. You walked through my door, and I'd like you to consider marrying me." Lily couldn't help but laugh. The kind of laugh that bubbled up when you were caught off guard and had no idea how else to respond. She put the package down on the floor, her eyes still locked with his, trying to gauge if she should be scared, amused, or simply walk away. "You're serious?" she asked, her voice carrying a mix of incredulity and curiosity. Ethan nodded. "Dead serious. I know it's unexpected, but if you're willing, I'd like to get to know you. And if it works, maybe we'll see where this crazy idea takes us." Lily looked at him, the sincerity in his eyes unnerving but strangely genuine. She had come here to deliver a package, not change the course of her life. But there was something in his gaze, a vulnerability that contrasted sharply with his confident demeanor, that made her pause. She wasn't used to seeing that kind of honesty, especially not from men like him. It was disarming, and against her better judgment, she found herself intrigued. "All right," she said, surprising even herself. "I'll have coffee with you. Let's start there." Ethan smiled for what felt like the first time in weeks, a real smile that reached his eyes. He stepped aside, letting her into the mansion, a place that suddenly seemed a little less empty. He led her to the living room, the grand space filled with art and expensive furniture, but Lily barely noticed any of it. She was too busy trying to make sense of what was happening, trying to understand why she hadn't just turned around and left. They sat down and Ethan poured them each a cup of coffee. He watched as Lily took a sip, her eyes scanning the room before landing back on him. There was an awkward silence at first, the kind that stretched between two people who were complete strangers, but were now, somehow, sharing an intimate moment. Ethan broke the silence, asking her about her work, her life, the things she enjoyed. He listened intently as she spoke, fascinated by the simplicity of her life, the honesty with which she described her struggles and her triumphs. Lily, in turn, found herself warming to Ethan. He was different from what she had expected, less arrogant, more thoughtful. He spoke about his work, his business, but also about the loneliness that came with it. He admitted that he had made mistakes, that he had lost sight of what mattered in his pursuit of success. It was strange hearing someone so powerful speak with such vulnerability, and it made Lily see him in a different light. Despite the warmth of their conversation, the differences between them loomed large. Ethan's life had been defined by control, every move calculated, every relationship strategic. Meanwhile, Lily was used to improvisation, dealing with whatever life threw her way. She couldn't imagine living in a house where people brought you your meals and cleaned up after you, where every aspect of life was meticulously managed. And yet, there was something about Ethan that drew her in, something that made her want to see where this unlikely connection could lead. The first real challenge came a few days later, when Ethan asked Lily to accompany him to a charity gala. It was a high-profile event, the kind that was filled with celebrities, influential business people, and members of high society. Lily hesitated. This was not her world, and the thought of being thrust into it terrified her. But Ethan was insistent. He wanted her by his side, wanted her to see the kind of life he led, even if it meant stepping far outside her comfort zone. Lily agreed, albeit reluctantly. She borrowed a gown from a friend, spent hours trying to make her hair behave, and eventually found herself standing in front of Ethan's mansion feeling completely out of place. When Ethan saw her, his breath caught in his throat. She looked stunning. Nervous, but stunning. He offered her his arm, and together they walked into the gala, the room buzzing with curiosity as the guests tried to figure out who this unfamiliar woman was. Throughout the evening, Lily felt the weight of 1,000 eyes on her. She was introduced to people she had only seen on TV, made small talk with executives whose companies she had heard of but knew nothing about. She felt like an imposter, like she didn't belong. But every time she looked at Ethan, he gave her a reassuring smile that made her feel just a little bit braver. Ethan, for his part, was proud to have Lily by his side. He could see how uncomfortable she was, but he admired her courage. He knew this was a lot to ask of her, but he wanted her to see his world, the good and the bad. He wanted her to understand what she was stepping into if she chose to stay. And as the night went on, he realized just how much he wanted her to stay. By the end of the evening, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the city lights, Lily turned to Ethan, her eyes searching his. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You could have anyone. Why did you choose me?" Ethan looked at her, his expression softening. "Because you're real," he said. "You're not here because of my money or my name. You're here because you want to be. And that means more to me than you could ever know." Lily felt her heart swell, the sincerity in his words touching her in a way she hadn't expected. She didn't know what the future held, didn't know if this crazy idea of his would work. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. And so it began, an outrageous pact between two strangers, a leap into the unknown. What started with an impulsive proposal at the front door was about to unfold into something neither of them could have anticipated. A journey filled with surprises, challenges, and perhaps the kind of love that money could never buy. Lily couldn't quite wrap her head around what she had gotten herself into. It wasn't every day that you were proposed to by a billionaire, much less when you had only just met him. Yet, here she was, sitting in the opulent living room of Ethan Cole, the man whose name was on every magazine cover, whose image represented power and prestige. She looked around, trying to take it all in. The marble floors, the grand chandelier, the artwork that she was sure was worth more than everything she had ever owned. She felt like an outsider, and the difference between their worlds couldn't have been more evident. Ethan, on the other hand, was finding this whole experience strangely exhilarating. For the first time in years, he was doing something completely unpredictable, and the tension that usually accompanied his high-stakes business deals was replaced by a different kind of anticipation. He watched Lily closely, seeing the awe and perhaps discomfort in her eyes. He knew this was all overwhelming, and he tried to ease into their conversation, pouring coffee for them both, hoping that something as simple as sharing a cup would break the tension. "So you're really a delivery driver?" Ethan asked, his voice softer now, as if trying to make her more comfortable. He knew it wasn't the most sophisticated question, but he was genuinely curious. He had spent his life surrounded by people whose worth was measured by their titles, their wealth, and their influence. Lily was a breath of fresh air, unpretentious, real, and utterly unlike anyone he had ever met. "Yes," Lily replied, trying to suppress a nervous smile. "It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills." There was a hint of defiance in her tone, as if she were used to being judged for what she did, and she wanted to set the record straight from the beginning. She was proud of her work. It was honest, and it gave her a sense of independence, something she had fought hard to maintain. Ethan nodded, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "I like that," he said simply. And he meant it. For a man whose life was full of pretense, Lily's honesty was refreshing. He leaned back in his chair, taking a sip of his coffee as he listened to her talk about her life, the struggles of making ends meet, the joy of small things, like having a free Sunday afternoon to walk in the park. These were things that seemed so ordinary, but to Ethan, they were extraordinary. He realized just how much he had missed out on in his pursuit of success. Despite the warmth of their conversation, the differences between them loomed large. Lily spoke of her modest upbringing, her tight-knit family, her dreams of one day opening her own small business. Maybe a bakery, she mused. Ethan listened, fascinated by the simplicity of her ambitions. For someone like him, whose every goal had been tied to wealth and power, it was difficult to understand wanting something so small, yet he found it endearing. She didn't want to dominate the world. She just wanted a piece of it that she could call her own. As the days passed, Ethan found himself wanting to see more of Lily. He invited her back, not for marriage, at least not yet, but just to spend time with her. He was intrigued, captivated by her openness, her willingness to speak her mind. She didn't treat him with the deference he was used to. She challenged him, questioned his motives, and even poked fun at his privileged life in a way that no one else dared to. And for once, Ethan didn't mind. He found himself laughing at her jokes, enjoying her company more than he had enjoyed anyone's in years. But the reality of their differences soon began to show. A few days after their initial meeting, Ethan invited Lily to a charity gala. It was an event he attended every year, full of celebrities, business moguls, and influential figures. He wanted her to see his world, to be part of it, if only for one night. Lily hesitated. She wasn't sure she could fit in amongst people whose lives were so different from hers. She felt like an imposter, someone who had accidentally stumbled into a world where she didn't belong. But Ethan insisted. He wanted her by his side, not because he needed a date, but because he wanted her to understand him, to understand the pressures that came with his lifestyle. He wanted her to see him for who he was, not just the image the world saw. On the night of the gala, Lily stood in front of Ethan's mansion feeling completely out of place. She had borrowed a gown from a friend, had spent hours trying to make her hair look presentable, and yet she felt inadequate. When Ethan came to greet her, his breath caught in his throat. She looked stunning, nervous, but stunning. He offered her his arm, and she took it hesitantly as they walked into the grand hall. The room was filled with people who exuded confidence, wealth, and privilege. Everywhere she looked, there were designer gowns, expensive jewelry, and perfectly polished smiles. Lily tried to blend in, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, scrutinized by people who were wondering who she was and what she was doing there. Ethan introduced her to a few people, his business partners, some old friends, and though they were polite, Lily could feel the curiosity in their eyes. They saw her as an enigma, someone who didn't quite fit into their carefully curated social circles. Ethan, however, was oblivious to the judgmental glances. He was proud to have Lily by his side. She was different from anyone in the room, and that was what made her special. He could see her discomfort, could feel her tense grip on his arm, but he admired her courage. She was stepping into a world that was completely foreign to her, and she was doing it for him. It made Ethan realize just how much he wanted this to work, how much he wanted her to stay. As the night wore on, Lily found herself feeling more and more out of place. The small talk, the fake smiles, the endless chatter about business deals and luxury vacations, it was all so far removed from her reality. She watched as Ethan moved through the crowd with ease, shaking hands, laughing, slipping effortlessly into the role he had played for so many years. He belonged here. This was his world, and as much as she liked him, Lily couldn't help but wonder if there was truly a place for her in it. Towards the end of the evening, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the city lights, Lily turned to Ethan, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You could have anyone. Why did you choose me?" Ethan looked at her, his expression softening. He reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair away from her face. "Because you're real," he said. "You're not here because of my money or my name. You're here because you want to be, and that means more to me than you could ever know." Lily looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that this could work, but the doubts lingered. They were from two different worlds, and no matter how much she wanted to be part of his, she couldn't change who she was. The following days were filled with moments of both connection and tension. Ethan tried to introduce Lily to more aspects of his life, inviting her to dinners, introducing her to his friends. But each time Lily felt the same sense of unease. She wasn't used to the opulence, the attention, the expectations that came with being associated with someone like Ethan. She missed the simplicity of her old life, the anonymity of it. One afternoon, after an especially awkward lunch with one of Ethan's business associates, Lily finally voiced her fears. They were sitting in the garden, the sun casting dappled shadows on the ground, and Lily turned to Ethan, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know if I can do this, Ethan," she said, her voice breaking. "I feel like I'm losing myself. I don't belong in your world, and I don't want to pretend that I do." Ethan's heart sank. He had known this was coming, had seen the struggle in her eyes every time they stepped into a room full of people who judged her for not fitting their mold. He reached out, taking her hand in his. "You don't have to change who you are, Lily," he said softly. "I don't want you to. I want you to be yourself, and I'll do whatever it takes to make this work." Lily looked at him, her eyes searching his. She could see the sincerity in his words, could see how much he wanted this. But she also knew that love wasn't always enough. There were realities that couldn't be ignored, differences that couldn't be bridged simply by wanting them to be. "I care about you, Ethan," she said, her voice trembling. "But I need to know that there's a place for me in your life. Not just as someone you bring to parties or introduce to your friends, but as someone who can be herself, without feeling like she has to change to fit in." Ethan nodded, his heart aching at the thought of losing her. He had spent so much of his life building walls around himself, keeping people out. And now that he had finally found someone who made him want to break those walls down, he was faced with the possibility that it might not be enough. He squeezed her hand, his eyes meeting hers. "There is a place for you, Lily," he said. "I promise you that, and I'll do whatever it takes to prove it to you." Lily smiled, a small, tentative smile. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that they could make this work. And as they sat there, in the quiet of the garden, she allowed herself to hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, this crazy, unexpected connection could be the beginning of something real, something worth fighting for. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges they hadn't yet faced. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough. The days turned into weeks, and slowly, Ethan and Lily began to find their rhythm. It wasn't always easy, and there were moments of doubt, on both sides. But amidst the challenges, they found a connection that felt real, something that gave both of them a sense of belonging that had been missing from their lives for so long. Ethan continued to open himself up to new experiences, allowing himself to be vulnerable in a way he had never done before. Lily, in turn, tried her best to adapt to the complexities of Ethan's world, learning to navigate the opulence and expectations that came with being by his side. But even as they were growing closer, a shadow loomed over their relationship. Ethan's life was public, far more public than Lily had ever imagined. Paparazzi followed his every move. Tabloids published stories about his wealth, his business, and now, about the mysterious woman he had been seen with. At first, the stories were nothing more than speculation, whispers about who she was and why Ethan Cole, the reclusive billionaire, had suddenly taken an interest in a nobody. But as time went on, the headlines became more intrusive, more malicious. It was early one morning when Ethan received a call from his public relations team. He was still in bed, Lily asleep beside him, when the phone rang, the screen lighting up with an unfamiliar number. He picked it up, his voice groggy as he answered. The voice on the other end was urgent, almost panicked. "Ethan, you need to see this," his PR manager said. "There's a story running about Lily. They've dug into her past." Ethan felt his stomach drop. He knew the media could be relentless, but he had hoped that keeping a low profile would spare Lily from the worst of it. He slipped out of bed, careful not to wake her, and walked into his study, his heart pounding as he opened his laptop. The headline on the gossip site made his blood run cold. "Billionaire's new love interest has a shady past. The truth about Lily Evans." He clicked on the link, his eyes scanning the article. It was filled with half-truths and outright lies, painting Lily as a gold digger, someone who had targeted Ethan for his wealth. They had dug up details about her financial struggles, twisting them to fit a narrative that she was desperate for money, that she had manipulated her way into Ethan's life. They had even found an old relationship, one that had ended badly, and portrayed her as untrustworthy, as someone who couldn't be trusted with Ethan's fortune. Ethan felt a mix of anger and fear. He knew the truth. He knew that Lily was nothing like what the article portrayed. She had been honest with him from the beginning, had never asked for anything from him. But he also knew how damaging these kinds of stories could be, how they could destroy a person's life. And more than anything, he was afraid of how this would affect Lily, how she would react when she saw it. He closed the laptop, his mind racing. He needed to protect her, needed to find a way to make this right. But before he could figure out what to do, he heard a soft voice behind him. "Ethan." Lily stood in the doorway, her hair tousled from sleep, her eyes filled with concern. "What's going on?" Ethan hesitated, his heart clenching at the thought of hurting her. But he knew he couldn't hide this from her. She deserved to know the truth. He gestured for her to come over, and she walked to his side, her eyes widening as she saw the headline on the screen. Lily's face went pale as she read the words, her hands trembling slightly. She scrolled through the article, her expression shifting from confusion to shock to anger. This isn't true," she said, her voice breaking. "Why would they say these things about me?" Ethan reached out, pulling her into his arms. "I know, Lily. I know it's not true. They're just trying to sell a story. They don't care about the truth." But Lily pulled away, her eyes filled with tears. "This is my life, Ethan. They're talking about my life like it's some kind of spectacle. They don't know me. They don't know anything about me." She shook her head, her voice trembling with emotion. "I knew this would happen. I knew that being with you would mean giving up my privacy, but I didn't think it would be like this." Ethan felt helpless. He had always been able to control the narrative when it came to his own life. He had the resources, the connections, the power to make stories disappear. But this wasn't about him. This was about Lily, and he realized that there were limits to what he could do to protect her. He couldn't erase the pain she was feeling, couldn't undo the damage that had been done. "Lily, I'll do whatever it takes to make this right," he said, his voice filled with desperation. "I'll talk to my lawyers. I'll get this story taken down. Just, please don't let this come between us." Lily looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of love and anguish. She knew Ethan meant well, that he was trying to protect her, but she also knew that this was just the beginning. If they stayed together, this would be her life, constantly under scrutiny, constantly judged by people who didn't know her. She had fought so hard to build a life for herself, a life that she was proud of. And now, it felt like it was slipping away. "I need some time, Ethan," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to think about whether I can do this." Ethan felt his heart break at her words, but he nodded, understanding. "Take all the time you need," he said, his voice cracking. "I love you, Lily. I want you to know that." Lily gave him a small, sad smile. "I love you too, Ethan. But sometimes love isn't enough." She turned and walked out of the room, and Ethan felt a sense of emptiness wash over him. He had thought that money could solve anything, that his wealth and power could protect the people he loved. But now he realized that there were some things that were beyond his control, some things that money couldn't fix. Over the next few days, Ethan tried to give Lily the space she needed. He stayed at his mansion, throwing himself into his work, trying to distract himself from the pain of her absence. He hired a team of lawyers to try and get the story retracted, to sue the tabloids for defamation. But the damage had already been done. The story had spread, and the rumors had taken on a life of their own. Lily, meanwhile, went back to her apartment. She needed to be alone, needed to figure out what she wanted. She missed Ethan, missed the way he made her feel, the way he looked at her like she was the only person in the world that mattered. But she couldn't ignore the reality of their situation. Being with Ethan meant giving up her privacy, giving up the life she had worked so hard to build. and she wasn't sure if she was ready for that. One evening, as she sat on her couch staring at the headlines on her phone, she realized that she had a choice to make. She could walk away from Ethan, go back to her old life, and never have to deal with the scrutiny again. Or she could fight. For herself. For Ethan. For the love they had found against all odds. It wouldn't be easy, and there would be times when she would feel overwhelmed, but maybe, just maybe, it would be worth it. Lily took a deep breath, her heart pounding as she made her decision. She picked up her phone and dialed Ethan's number, her hands trembling as she waited for him to answer. "Lily?" Ethan's voice was filled with hope, and she could hear the emotion in his tone. "Ethan," she said, her voice steady, "I've been thinking, and I want to fight for this, for us, but we need to do it on our own terms. I can't be part of the spectacle. I need you to understand that." Ethan closed his eyes, relief washing over him. "I understand, Lily, and I'll do whatever it takes. We'll do this our way, I promise." Lily smiled, a sense of determination filling her. "Then let's do it. Let's show them that love isn't about money or power. It's about two people who choose each other no matter what." Ethan felt his heart swell with love for her. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, that there would be more challenges to face. But with Lily by his side, he was ready for whatever came next. And so, the turning point became the catalyst for something even greater, a determination to fight not just for their love, but for the kind of life they wanted to build together. One that was free from the expectations and judgments of others, one that was built on trust, honesty, and the deep connection they had found in each other. They knew it wouldn't be easy, but they also knew that what they had was worth fighting for. And for the first time in a long time, both of them felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, the decision to fight for their love brought a renewed sense of purpose to both Ethan and Lily, but it also brought new challenges. They had to navigate the world that Ethan inhabited, a world that seemed determined to pull them apart at every turn. But this time, they were doing it together on their own terms. It was not easy, and there were days when they both wondered if it was all worth it. But they reminded each other of why they had chosen to stay, why they had decided to fight, and that made all the difference. After Lily's phone call, Ethan wasted no time. He began making changes to his life, real changes that would ensure Lily's comfort and well-being. He put up boundaries with the media, using his influence to keep the paparazzi away from their personal lives. It wasn't perfect. No amount of wealth could completely shield them from public interest, but it was enough to give them some peace. He also distanced himself from people in his circle who refused to respect his relationship with Lily. For the first time, he was willing to lose connections if it meant protecting what truly mattered. Lily moved back into Ethan's mansion, but this time, it felt different. She no longer felt like an outsider. She felt like she was part of a partnership. Ethan gave her the space she needed, never pushing her to conform to his lifestyle, but instead trying to find a balance between their two worlds. He even encouraged her to continue her work as a delivery driver, despite the raised eyebrows it caused among some of his acquaintances. One day, Ethan surprised Lily by arranging for her to meet with a friend who owned a small bakery in the city. He remembered her mentioning her dream of owning a bakery one day, and he wanted to help her make that dream a reality. Lily was overwhelmed by the gesture. It wasn't about the money. It was about the fact that he had listened, that he cared about her dreams as much as she did. Lily met with Ethan's friend, a warm middle-aged woman named Margaret who had been running her bakery for over 20 years. Margaret welcomed Lily with open arms, showing her around the cozy shop, letting her see how things worked behind the scenes. It was a world that Lily felt comfortable in, a world that was simple, honest, and filled with the warmth of freshly baked bread and laughter. Margaret offered her a part-time position, and Lily accepted without hesitation. It was a step towards her dream, and it made her feel like she was finally finding her place. As the weeks turned into months, Ethan and Lily began to settle into a new kind of routine. They spent their mornings together, sometimes at the mansion, sometimes walking through the city, exploring the parks and little cafes that Lily loved. In the afternoons, Lily would head to the bakery, while Ethan went to his office. They had dinner together every evening, cooking side by side in the kitchen, laughing as they tried, and often failed, to follow recipes. Ethan also made an effort to step into Lily's world. He visited the bakery, helping out when things got busy, even if it meant standing behind the counter and awkwardly serving customers. He learned how to make bread, his hands covered in flour, a look of concentration on his face as Margaret gave him instructions. It was a far cry from the boardrooms and negotiations he was used to, but Ethan found it strangely fulfilling. It was the first time in his life that he had done something not for the sake of money or power, but simply for the joy of it. Lily, in turn, made an effort to understand Ethan's world. She attended some of his business dinners, but only the ones that were important to him. She no longer felt the pressure to fit in, no longer worried about the judgmental glances or whispered comments. She knew who she was, and she knew that Ethan loved her for it. And that gave her the confidence to face whatever challenges came her way. One evening, as they sat on the couch, watching the fire crackle in the fireplace, Ethan turned to Lily, his eyes filled with warmth. "I want to show you something," he said, standing up and taking her hand. He led her through the mansion, down a hallway she hadn't paid much attention to before. At the end of the hallway was a door, and Ethan opened it, revealing a room that had been completely transformed. Lily gasped as she stepped inside. The room was bright and inviting, filled with shelves of cookbooks, a small oven, and a large wooden table in the center. It was a makeshift kitchen, one designed just for her. There was even a window box filled with herbs, their fragrance filling the air. "I know it's not quite a bakery," Ethan said, his voice filled with emotion. "But I wanted you to have a place here that's yours, a place where you can bake, create, do whatever makes you happy." Lily felt tears well up in her eyes. She turned to Ethan, her heart swelling with love. "Ethan, it's perfect," she said, her voice breaking. She wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. "Thank you for everything." Ethan held her close, his heart filled with a sense of peace. He had spent so much of his life chasing after things that didn't matter, things that never brought him true happiness. But with Lily, he had found something real, something worth fighting for. As their relationship grew stronger, so did their determination to create a life that was truly theirs. They made decisions together, not based on what society expected or what would look good in the media, but based on what made them happy. They learned to lean on each other, to communicate openly about their fears and insecurities, and to celebrate each other's victories no matter how small. There were still challenges, of course. The media hadn't completely backed off, and there were times when Lily would see her name in a headline and feel that familiar pang of anxiety. But Ethan was always there, reminding her of what truly mattered, reminding her that they were in this together. He hired a new PR team, one that was dedicated to protecting their privacy, and he made it clear to his business associates that his personal life was off limits. And there were times when Ethan struggled too. There were moments when the pressure of his business threatened to consume him, when the weight of his responsibilities seemed too much to bear. But Lily was always there, grounding him, reminding him of the simple joys that made life worth living. She encouraged him to take breaks, to step away from work when it became too much, and to find balance in his life. One day, after a particularly long and stressful week, Lily convinced Ethan to take a day off. They packed a picnic and drove out to the countryside, spending the day by a lake, away from the noise and chaos of the city. They lay on a blanket, the sun warming their skin, and talked about everything and nothing. They laughed, they shared stories, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt completely at peace. As the sun began to set, Ethan turned to Lily, his heart swelling with love and gratitude. "I don't know what I did to deserve you," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "But I'm so glad you walked through that door." Lily smiled, her eyes shining with tears. "I think we were both exactly what the other needed," she said. "You've given me so much, Ethan, a life I never could have imagined, and I want you to know that I'm in this for the long haul, no matter what." Ethan took her hand, his eyes locking with hers. Me too, Lily. Whatever comes our way, we'll face it together. They kissed, the world around them fading away as they held each other close. In that moment, they knew that they had found something worth fighting for, something that was real and lasting. They had faced challenges, they had faced doubt, but through it all, they had grown stronger, both as individuals and as a couple. And as they sat there watching the sun dip below the horizon, they knew that the journey ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be more obstacles, more moments of doubt. But they also knew that they had each other, and that, they realized, was all they needed to face whatever came next. Together, they had found a way to bridge the gap between their two worlds, a way to build a life that was uniquely theirs. They had found joy in the simple moments, strength in each other's love, and hope in the promise of a future they were creating together. And that, more than anything, was what made their love truly extraordinary. The months that Ethan and Lily spent building their lives together were some of the happiest they had ever known. They had found a rhythm, a balance between their two worlds that felt genuine and true. Ethan's mansion, once a place of empty grandeur, had become a warm, inviting home filled with laughter, the scent of baked goods, and love. Lily's small kitchen had become her sanctuary, and Ethan's presence had become her greatest source of comfort and strength. They had managed to create something beautiful, something real, and both of them were more committed than ever to making it last. But the past has a way of catching up, and just when everything seemed to be falling into place, an old ghost reappeared to shake the foundations they had worked so hard to build. One late afternoon, as Lily was busy in the kitchen, rolling out dough for a fresh batch of bread, Ethan came home looking unusually tense. She noticed it right away. The way he loosened his tie, his posture stiff, his face set in a grim expression. She put down her rolling pin, wiping her hands on her apron, her heart sinking. She had seen that look before. It was the look Ethan wore when something had gone wrong. "Ethan?" she called out softly, her voice filled with concern as she approached him. "What happened?" Ethan looked up, his eyes meeting hers, and Lily could see the worry in them. He took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. "There's something we need to talk about," he said, his voice strained. He gestured for her to follow him into the living room, and they sat down on the couch. He hesitated for a moment, and Lily reached out, taking his hand in hers, giving him the strength he needed to continue. "It's about my company," Ethan began, his voice tight. "We're under investigation. There's been an accusation, something about insider trading. They're saying I had information that wasn't public, that I used it to my advantage." Lily's eyes widened, her heart pounding in her chest. She had heard about these kinds of things, about powerful people using their influence to manipulate the market. But she knew Ethan. She knew that he was fiercely ethical when it came to his business, that he would never cross that line. "I didn't do it, Lily," Ethan said, his voice breaking slightly. "I swear to you I didn't do anything wrong, but the media is already running with it, and it's turning into a scandal. They're digging up everything, my past, my business deals, and even us." Lily felt her stomach turn. She knew how relentless the media could be, how they would twist the truth to fit their narrative. She remembered the headlines from months ago, the way they had portrayed her as someone she wasn't. And now it was happening again, only this time it was even worse. "They're saying that you knew," Ethan said, his eyes filled with pain. "That you were part of it, that you're the reason I made those decisions." Lily felt the world tilt around her, her heart pounding in her ears. "What?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's ridiculous. I don't even know anything about your business. How could they say that?" "They're saying you influenced me," Ethan said, his voice filled with frustration. "They're painting you as some kind of manipulator, someone who got close to me to use me for your own gain. It's all lies, but people are believing it." Lily felt tears well up in her eyes, her chest tightening with fear. "Ethan, I don't know what to do," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought we were past this. I thought we were safe." Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I know, Lily. I know, I'm so sorry. I never wanted this for you. I never wanted you to be dragged into my world like this." They stayed like that for a long moment, holding each other as the weight of the situation pressed down on them. Lily could feel Ethan's heart pounding against her cheek, could feel the fear in his embrace, and for the first time in a long time, she felt truly scared of what this meant for them, for their future. The following days were a blur of chaos and uncertainty. Ethan was constantly on the phone with his lawyers, trying to fight the accusations and prove his innocence. The media swarmed their home, cameras flashing every time they stepped outside. Lily felt trapped, unable to escape the relentless scrutiny. She had always known that being with Ethan meant giving up a certain level of privacy, but this was different. This was an attack on her character, on her integrity, on everything she held dear. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Lily found herself alone in the kitchen staring at the dough she had been trying to knead. Her hands were covered in flour, her eyes red from crying. She felt lost, overwhelmed by the weight of everything that was happening. She had given up so much to be with Ethan, had fought so hard to make their relationship work, but now it felt like it was all slipping away. The door opened, and Ethan walked in, his face etched with exhaustion. He saw Lily standing there, her shoulders slumped, her eyes filled with despair, and his heart broke. He walked over to her, wrapping his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Lily," he whispered, his voice filled with emotion. "I wish I could make this all go away. I wish I could protect you from all of this." Lily closed her eyes, leaning into him. "I know, Ethan," she said softly. "I know you're trying. But I don't know how much more of this I can take. It's like we're fighting a battle we can't win." Ethan turned her around, his eyes locking with hers. "We can win this, Lily," he said, his voice filled with determination. "I promise you we can. But I need you to believe in me. I need you to believe in us." Lily looked at him, her eyes searching his. She could see the love there, the desperation, the hope. And despite everything, she still loved him. She still believed in him. "I do, Ethan," she said, her voice breaking. "I believe in you. I don't know how to make it stop." Ethan took a deep breath, his mind racing. He knew there was only one way to end this, only one way to prove their innocence and put an end to the lies. He had to find the source of the accusations, had to prove that someone was trying to bring him down. It wouldn't be easy, and it would mean putting himself and Lily at risk, but he was willing to do whatever it took to protect the woman he loved. "I'm going to fix this, Lily," he said, his voice steady. "I'm going to find out who's behind this, and I'm going to make it right. But I need you to stay with me. I need you to trust me." Lily nodded, her heart pounding. She knew this was dangerous, knew that they were about to step into uncharted territory, but she also knew that she couldn't walk away. Not now, not after everything they had been through. "I trust you, Ethan," she said, her voice filled with determination. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Ethan smiled, a sense of hope washing over him. He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Together," he whispered. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Ethan began digging into the accusations, using every resource at his disposal to find out who was behind them. He worked late into the night, meeting with lawyers, private investigators, and trusted friends who were willing to help. He knew he was taking a risk, knew that whoever was behind this was powerful, someone who wanted to see him fall. But he also knew that he had to fight, not just for himself, but for Lily. Lily, in turn, found strength she didn't know she had. She stood by Ethan's side, supporting him in every way she could. She faced the media with her head held high, refusing to let them see her fear. She continued working at the bakery, finding solace in the simple act of baking, in the warmth and comfort it brought her. It was her way of staying grounded, of reminding herself of who she was and what truly mattered. And then, one night, a breakthrough came. Ethan received a call from one of his investigators, a lead that pointed to a former business associate, someone who had been disgruntled after a failed deal. It was someone Ethan had trusted, someone who had once been close to him. The betrayal cut deep, but it also gave him the leverage he needed to fight back. Ethan confronted the man, armed with evidence that proved the accusations were false, that they had been fabricated out of spite. It was a tense, heated exchange, but in the end, Ethan emerged victorious. The truth came to light, the charges were dropped, and the media was forced to retract their stories. It was over. When Ethan returned home that night, Lily was waiting for him in the living room, her heart pounding with anticipation. He walked in, his face a mixture of exhaustion and relief, and Lily knew he had done it. They had won. She ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck, tears streaming down her face. "You did it," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "You really did it." Ethan held her close, his own eyes misting over. "We did it, Lily," he said. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." They stood there holding each other, the weight of the past few weeks slowly lifting off their shoulders. It had been a battle that had tested their love, their strength, and their commitment to each other. But they had come out on the other side, stronger and more united than ever. As they pulled away, Ethan cupped Lily's face in his hands, his eyes locking with hers. "I love you, Lily," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "and I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to go through anything like this again." Lily smiled, her heart swelling with love. "I love you too, Ethan," she said, "and I know that, whatever comes our way, we can face it. Together." They kissed, the world around them fading away as they held each other close. In that moment, they knew that they had faced their greatest challenge yet, and they had won. Their love had been tested, but it had emerged stronger, more resilient and more beautiful than ever. And as they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, they knew that the future was theirs to create. Together, side by side, no matter what. A calm had settled over their lives in the weeks that followed the resolution of the scandal. It was as if a storm had passed, leaving behind a newfound clarity and purpose. Ethan and Lily had fought through some of the darkest days they had ever experienced, and now they were ready to embrace the life they had fought so hard to protect. The world around them had returned to its usual hum, but for Ethan and Lily, everything felt different, renewed, hopeful, and more precious than ever. Ethan took steps to restructure his company, focusing on ensuring that his business was not just profitable, but also ethical and transparent. He had learned the hard way that power could be both a blessing and a curse, and he no longer wanted to use it merely to accumulate wealth. He wanted to make a difference, to create something that truly mattered. It was a shift that surprised many of his business associates, but Ethan was committed to this new vision. He knew that there were more important things in life than money and status, things like integrity, love, and the happiness of the people he cared about. Lily, meanwhile, continued her work at the bakery, but with a new sense of purpose. Margaret, her mentor, had offered her an opportunity to become a partner in the bakery, to take on more responsibility, and help grow the business. It was a dream come true for Lily, a chance to finally be part of something she had always wanted. She accepted the offer, and soon she was busy with plans to expand the bakery, introducing new recipes and reaching more customers. It was hard work, but it was also incredibly rewarding, and every day she felt like she was making progress towards her dreams. One evening, as they sat together in the kitchen enjoying a quiet dinner, Ethan turned to Lily, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You know, I've been thinking," he began, his voice soft. "We've spent so much time building our lives around this house, this city, but what if we took some time to travel to see the world together?" Lily looked at him surprised. She had never thought of Ethan as the type to leave behind his responsibilities even for a short while, but the idea of traveling, of exploring the world with him, filled her with excitement. She smiled, her eyes lighting up. "I think that sounds amazing," she said. "Where would you want to go?" Ethan's face broke into a smile, the kind that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "Anywhere. Everywhere. I want to see the places you've always dreamed of visiting. I want to experience life with you without any pressure, without any expectations, just us." Lily felt her heart swell with love. She reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. "Then let's do it," she said. "Let's go see the world." And so, they began to make plans. They would take a few months off, Ethan from his company and Lily from the bakery, and they would travel together. It was a decision that felt liberating, like they were finally taking control of their lives, living for themselves rather than for the expectations of others. A few weeks later, they found themselves standing at the airport, their suitcases in tow, ready to embark on their adventure. They had no set itinerary, no specific destinations in mind, just a list of places they wanted to see, experiences they wanted to share. It was the kind of spontaneity that Ethan had never allowed himself before, and it felt exhilarating. Their first stop was Italy, a place that Lily had always dreamed of visiting. They stayed in a small village in Tuscany, waking up each morning to the sight of rolling hills and vineyards that stretched as far as the eye could see. They spent their days exploring the countryside, tasting local wines, and cooking with the villagers who welcomed them with open arms. For Ethan, it was a revelation. He had spent so much of his life surrounded by luxury, but it was the simplicity of their time in Tuscany that brought him the greatest joy. From Italy, they traveled to Greece, where they wandered through ancient ruins, marveling at the history that surrounded them. They spent their evenings watching the sun set over the Aegean Sea, their hands intertwined as they sat on the beach, the waves lapping at their feet. It was a time of reflection, of appreciating the journey they had been on, the challenges they had overcome, and the love that had grown stronger with each passing day. Their travels took them to many places: France, Japan, New Zealand. Each destination bringing new experiences, new memories that they would cherish forever. They laughed, they learned, and most importantly, they grew. They learned to rely on each other, to navigate the unknown with a sense of adventure and wonder. And through it all, their love deepened, becoming a source of strength and comfort that neither of them had ever known before. One evening, as they sat on a terrace overlooking the sparkling lights of Paris, Ethan turned to Lily, his heart pounding with anticipation. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Lily's eyes widened, her breath catching as Ethan got down on one knee, his eyes locking with hers. "Lily," he began, his voice filled with emotion. "I know this isn't the first time I've asked you to marry me, but I hope it's the last. You've changed my life in ways I never could have imagined. You've shown me what it means to love, to truly live. And I want to spend the rest of my life with you, traveling, dreaming, growing. Will you marry me?" Lily felt tears well up in her eyes, her heart swelling with love. She smiled, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Yes, Ethan, 1,000 times yes." Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger and they kissed, the city of Paris serving as the perfect backdrop for the beginning of the next chapter of their lives. It was a moment that felt like a dream, a culmination of everything they had fought for, everything they had built together. When they returned home from their travels, they were different people. They had seen the world, experienced its beauty, and found a deeper connection with each other. They were ready to start the next chapter of their lives, together. Ethan continued his work at the company, but with a new perspective. He was no longer driven by the pursuit of power or wealth. Instead, he focused on using his influence to make a positive impact, to create opportunities for others, and to build a legacy that he could be proud of. He knew that his wealth was a tool, one that could be used to do good in the world, and he was determined to do just that. Lily, meanwhile, took on a greater role at the bakery, helping Margaret expand the business, and even opening a second location. It was a dream come true for her, a chance to create something that was hers, something that brought joy to others. She loved her work, loved the sense of community that came with it, and most of all, loved the life she had built with Ethan. They settled into a new routine, one that was filled with love, laughter, and the kind of happiness that came from truly living. They spent their weekends at the bakery, helping out during the busy mornings, and their evenings cooking together, enjoying the simple pleasures of life. They made time for each other, for their dreams, and for the love that had brought them together against all odds. And as they stood together, looking out at the sunset from the balcony of their home, they knew that they had found something truly special. Their journey had been filled with challenges, with moments of doubt and fear, but through it all, they had found each other. They had learned that love wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing each other every single day, no matter what. "Here's to us," Ethan said, raising a glass of wine, his eyes locking with Lily's. "To everything we've been through, and everything that's still to come." Lily smiled, her heart swelling with love. "To us," she echoed, clinking her glass against his. They kissed, the world around them fading away as they held each other close. They knew that there would still be challenges ahead. Life was never perfect, and there would always be ups and downs. But they also knew that, as long as they had each other, they could face anything. Together, they had built a life that was real, that was filled with love, laughter, and the promise of a future that was theirs to create. And that, they realized, was all they ever needed. With their love stronger than ever, Ethan and Lily embraced the future with open hearts and open minds. They had learned that true happiness came not from wealth or success, but from the simple moments shared with the people they loved. And as they stood together, ready to face whatever the world had in store, they knew that their love story was just beginning. A story of hope, resilience, and a love that could conquer anything. Years had passed since that fateful day when Ethan Cole, a billionaire in search of meaning, made the impulsive decision to propose to the first woman who walked through his door. It was a decision that had changed everything, not just for Ethan, but for Lily as well. Together they had built a life filled with love, growth, and adventure. And now, as they looked back on everything they had been through, they knew that every challenge, every obstacle had been worth it. The world around them had changed, but some things remained constant, like the love they had for each other. A love that had only grown deeper with each passing day. Their home, once an empty mansion that symbolized Ethan's wealth and success, had become a place filled with warmth and laughter. It was no longer just a house. It was a home, filled with the memories they had created together. Lily stood in the kitchen, the late afternoon sun streaming through the windows, casting a golden glow across the room. She was baking, something she still found immense joy in, even after all these years. The scent of freshly baked bread filled the air, and she smiled to herself, remembering the early days of her relationship with Ethan, when she had found solace in this very kitchen. She had grown so much since then, had found her place in the world, and it was all thanks to the love and support Ethan had given her. The door opened, and Ethan walked in, a smile spreading across his face as he saw Lily at the counter. He walked over to her, wrapping his arms around her from behind, pressing a gentle kiss to her cheek. "Smells amazing," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "What are you making today?" Lily leaned back against him, her heart swelling with love. "Just a simple loaf," she said. "Something for dinner tonight." Ethan nodded, his eyes twinkling. "You know, I don't think I'll ever get tired of coming home to the smell of your baking. It's my favorite part of the day." Lily turned, her eyes meeting his. "And you're mine," she said, her voice soft. She reached up, brushing a lock of hair away from his forehead. "How was your day?" Ethan sighed, his expression growing thoughtful. "It was good," he said. "Busy as usual, but good. I had a meeting with the foundation. We're moving forward with the new scholarship program." Lily's eyes lit up. The foundation was something that had become incredibly important to Ethan over the years. After everything they had been through, he had decided to use his wealth to make a difference, to give back to those who needed it most. He had started a foundation dedicated to providing opportunities for underprivileged youth, scholarships, mentorship programs, resources that could change lives. It was his way of using his success for good, and Lily couldn't have been prouder of him. "That's wonderful, Ethan," she said, her voice filled with pride. "You're making such a difference." Ethan smiled, his eyes filled with emotion. "We're making a difference, Lily. None of this would have been possible without you." Lily shook her head. "You give me too much credit," she said. "You're the one who made all of this happen." Ethan took her hands in his expression softening. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," he said. "You've given me purpose, Lily. You've given me a reason to want to be better, to do better, and I will never stop being grateful for that." Lily felt tears well up in her eyes, her heart filled with love. "I love you, Ethan," she said, her voice breaking. "More than anything." Ethan smiled, pulling her into his arms. "I love you too, Lily. Always." Life had become a beautiful balance of simplicity and purpose for Ethan and Lily. They had created a world where they could both thrive. A world that was filled with love, laughter, and the kind of happiness that came from living authentically. They still traveled, taking trips whenever they could, exploring new places and finding joy in the experiences they shared. But their favorite place, the place they always returned to, was home. The bakery had grown into a thriving business, with 2 locations and a loyal customer base. Lily loved her work, loved the sense of community that came with it, and most of all, loved the fact that she was living her dream. She still spent time at the original bakery, working side by side with Margaret, who had become not just a mentor but a dear friend. Together they had built something special, something that brought joy to others and made them proud. Ethan, meanwhile, had found a new sense of fulfillment in his work. His company was still successful, but it was no longer just about profits. It was about making a difference, about creating opportunities for others, and about using his influence to bring about positive change. He had also become deeply involved with the foundation, dedicating his time and resources to causes that mattered to him. It was work that filled him with a sense of purpose, and he was proud of the legacy he was building. They had also grown their family. 2 years after their travels, Lily had given birth to a beautiful baby girl named Emma. She was the light of their lives, a bundle of joy that had brought even more love into their home. Watching Ethan with Emma had been one of the greatest joys of Lily's life. He was an incredible father, patient, loving, and completely devoted. And Emma adored him, her eyes lighting up every time he walked into the room. One afternoon, as the 3 of them sat in the garden, Emma toddling around on her chubby little legs, Ethan turned to Lily, his heart swelling with love. "You know," he said, his voice filled with emotion, "I never imagined my life could be like this. I never imagined I could be this happy." Lily smiled, her eyes filled with tears. "Neither did I," she said, her voice breaking. "But I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world." Ethan reached over, taking her hand in his eyes locking with hers. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" he said, his voice soft. Lily nodded, her heart swelling. "We have," she said, "and I wouldn't change a single thing." They watched as Emma stumbled over to a patch of flowers, her laughter filling the air as she plucked a daisy and brought it over to her parents. She handed it to Lily, her eyes wide with pride. "Flower, Mama," she said, her voice filled with delight. Lily took the flower, her heart melting. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said, her voice filled with love. She pulled Emma into her lap, pressing a kiss to her soft curls. Ethan watched them, his heart swelling with a sense of peace. He had spent so much of his life chasing after things that didn't matter: money, power, prestige. But now he realized that the greatest riches in life were the ones that couldn't be bought. They were the moments like this, moments of love, of laughter, of pure, unfiltered joy. And as he sat there, surrounded by his family, Ethan knew that he had found what he had been searching for all those years ago. He had found love, purpose, and a sense of belonging that went beyond anything he could have ever imagined. He had found a partner in Lily, a woman who had shown him what it meant to truly live, to love without fear, and to embrace the unknown. He had found a daughter in Emma, a little girl who had brought light into his life in a way he never thought possible. And as the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the garden, Ethan knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more adventures, more challenges, more moments of growth. But whatever came their way, they would face it together, as a family. "Here's to the future," Ethan said. his voice filled with hope as he looked at Lily and Emma. To all the adventures still to come? Lily smiled, her heart swelling with love. To the future, she echoed, her eyes shining with tears. And to us. Always. They leaned in, their foreheads touching as they held each other close, their daughter giggling in Lily's lap. It was a moment of pure, unfiltered happiness. A moment that captured everything they had fought for, everything they had built together. And as they sat there wrapped in each other's arms, they knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together, with love, with courage, and with a sense of adventure that would never fade. Their journey had been filled with ups and downs, with challenges and triumphs. But through it all, they had found something truly extraordinary. A love that could withstand anything, a love that was real and true, and a life that was filled with purpose and joy. And that, they realized, was all they ever needed. With their love as the foundation, Ethan, Lily, and Emma embraced each day with open hearts, ready for whatever the future had in store. They had learned that true happiness wasn't about wealth or status. It was about the people you loved, the moments you shared, and the journey you took together. And as they looked towards the future, they knew that their greatest adventure was just beginning, a story of love, family, and a life lived fully, deeply, and with purpose.